Once upon a time, in a small dusty village surrounded by hills and dry farmland, there lived a girl named Adiz. She was 17, tall and slim, with skin the color of fresh palm kernels and a face that still carried sadness, even when she smiled. Her eyes were soft, like someone who had cried too many silent tears and never got the chance to wipe them away. Everyone in the village knew Adiz, not because she had rich parents, or fine clothes, or a loud voice. No, people knew her because she was the girl who lost everything and still never complained. After her parents died in a fire 5 years ago, Adiz was taken in by her father's younger sister, Mama Neka, and her husband, Uncle Sunday. From that day, her life changed completely. The warm beds and fresh food she once enjoyed disappeared. She no longer wore the beautiful clothes her mother used to sew for her. She no longer sat in front of the house braiding her mother's hair or singing with her father during evening walks. Instead, Adiz became the house girl. Every morning, while the rest of the household still slept, Adiz was already up, sweeping the compound with a broom that scratched her fingers. She cooked, fetched water, washed clothes, and took care of her cousin Chainia, who was just 1 year younger than her. But Chainia never lifted a finger. "Where's my breakfast?" Chainia shouted from inside the house one morning. Adiz didn't answer. She was in the backyard, cooking yam on a firewood stove, her eyes red from the smoke. Mama Neka stepped out of the house with a wrapper tied loosely around her chest. She looked around, her voice sharp. "Hey, this girl. So it's now that you are cooking? Do you want my daughter to faint before you serve food?" Adiz quickly stood, wiping her hands on her wrapper. "I'm sorry, Auntie. The fire was slow this morning because the wood was wet." Mama Neka hissed loudly and pointed a long finger at her. "Don't give me excuses. Am I the one who told you to use wet wood? Useless girl. Always behaving like she's doing us a favor by living here." Adiz bent her head. "I'm sorry, Auntie." "Sorry won't cook the yam faster," the woman shouted, turning away. After breakfast, Adiz walked to the village market, carrying a big tray of vegetables on her head. She balanced it carefully as she walked, sweat rolling down her back, even though it was still morning. At the market, other girls her age laughed, joked, and even wore light makeup. But Adiz just stood quietly by a wooden table, arranging her aunt's vegetables and calling out to buyers with a low voice. Some women pitied her. "Fine girl like this, see the kind of life she's living," one woman whispered to another. But others only laughed. "Her beauty is a waste," a woman said, biting into a mango. "She's just a housemaid with no future." Adiz heard them, but she said nothing. That evening, after selling everything, she returned home with the money wrapped in a piece of cloth. She walked into the living room and handed it to her uncle, who was sitting on a wooden bench, fanning himself. "This is the money from the market, sir," she said, keeping her voice low. Uncle Sunday collected it and counted it with a frown. "This is all?" "Yes, sir. The prices went down today. People were not really buying," she explained. "Or maybe you've started stealing our money," he said, standing up slowly. "Do you think we don't know the kind of girl you are?" Adiz's eyes widened. "No, sir. I swear I didn't take anything." He moved close to her. "You didn't, eh? So you're now calling me a liar?" "No, sir. I would never." A sharp slap cut her words short. She staggered backward, holding her cheek. Mama Neka walked in just then. "What happened?" "She brought back small money and is giving me story. This girl will put us in trouble one day." Mama Neka folded her arms and glared at Adiz. "I've warned you before. You won't bring shame to my family. I don't care who your parents were. As long as you're under my roof, you will behave like someone who knows her place." Adiz swallowed hard. Her voice shook. "I'm sorry, Auntie. Take your sorry and go and sweep the compound before I deal with you." That night, Adiz sat outside the small kitchen with a candle in front of her. She opened a worn-out Bible that used to belong to her father. Her fingers brushed over his handwriting inside the cover. "Keep trusting, Adiz. God sees everything." She smiled sadly and whispered, "Mama, Papa, miss you, but I'll keep being strong." A few days later, something changed in the house. A tall man in a white car came to visit. He wore gold rings and carried himself with pride. His name was Chief Ig, and he had come to seek a wife. Mama Neka and Uncle Sunday welcomed him like royalty. They served him drinks and even opened a bottle of malt they had been hiding. "Chief, you are welcome," Uncle Sunday said, grinning. "Our daughter Chania is ripe for marriage." Chief Ig laughed. "I actually came to ask for your niece's hand. The one I saw at the market last week, Adiz, I believe. She carries herself with so much humility." The smiles on their faces disappeared. Mama Neka's eyes darkened. She forced a laugh. "Chief, you must be joking. That girl? She's a troubled one. We're just managing her. She talks to boys anyhow and even stole from us once." Adiz, who was in the kitchen, overheard everything. Her hands trembled. Chief Ig frowned. "Oh, I didn't know." Uncle Sunday nodded quickly. "Better you take our real daughter. Adiz is just a burden we're carrying." The next day, Chief Ig left the village. He didn't return. Adiz stayed quiet, but her heart was broken. Not because she wanted to marry Chief Ig, but because her own blood had destroyed her name with lies. Later that evening, while the family was eating, Uncle Sunday suddenly banged the table. "This girl is bringing us disgrace," he shouted. "Imagine, a whole chief came for marriage, and because of her, he left." "But you told him she was bad," Chania said, confused. "Keep quiet." Mama Neka snapped. "That girl is a curse. I don't want to see her in this house again." Uncle Sunday stood and paced the room. "We'll marry her off. Let her go and suffer in another man's house." "To who?" Mama Neka asked. A slow, wicked smile spread across his face. "To that beggar that sleeps under the bridge. Obina." Everyone turned to him in shock. Mama Neka blinked. "Obina? That mad-looking man with torn clothes?" "Yes. Let the whole village laugh. Let them know that this girl is not our daughter. If shame is what she wants to bring, we'll give it to her fully." Adiz stood silently at the doorway. Her heart dropped. They had made their decision. They were going to destroy what was left of her dignity, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The next morning, Adiz woke up before the sun rose. But this time, it wasn't to sweep the compound or boil water. She just sat quietly outside the small kitchen, her hands wrapped around her knees, her face pale and blank. She had not slept at all. Not after hearing what Uncle Sunday said the night before. "We'll marry her off to that beggar that sleeps under the bridge. Obina." The words kept repeating in her mind like the sound of a leaking tap. She stared at the red sand in front of her and whispered to herself, "What did I ever do wrong? Why do they hate me this much?" She didn't cry. Her tears had dried up long ago. Behind her, the wooden door creaked open. It was Mama Neka. "Adiz!" the woman barked. Adiz stood up quickly and faced her. "Come inside. You will help me wash Chania's white lace gown. She's going to the youth meeting this weekend. Don't stain it, or you will regret it." Adiz nodded. "Yes, Auntie." She followed her inside, moving like someone without a soul. Chania was lying on the cushion, chewing gum and pressing her phone. She didn't even look up when Adiz entered. As Adiz collected the gown and turned to leave, Uncle Sunday entered the room, clapping his hands together. "Good news," he shouted. Mama Neka dropped the cup she was holding. "What happened?" Uncle Sunday grinned wide, his yellow teeth showing. "I just spoke to Baba Sadiq. He said Obina agreed. The wedding will be this Saturday." Adiz froze. Chania sat up quickly. "You're serious?" "Very serious," he said. "We will disgrace her properly. Let the whole village gather and laugh. Let them know she is not one of us." Mama Neka smiled and clapped slowly. "It is finished. The shame will follow her forever." Chania laughed. "Maybe she'll give birth beside the gutter too." Adiz stood there, still holding the white gown in her hands. No one looked at her. No one asked her how she felt. No one even remembered that she was a human being with a heart. By afternoon, news had already started spreading. The woman who sold pepper near the well was the first to talk. "Have you heard? That Adi's girl is marrying the madman that lives under the bridge." The tailor next to her gasped. "Obina? That one that wears 4 different slippers on 2 feet?" "Yes, now." Within hours, the whole village was talking. Some laughed. Some shook their heads. Some pitied her. But none of them stopped the wedding. Nobody cared. On Friday evening, one day before the wedding, Adiz sat under the orange tree beside the house, washing the last of China's clothes. She hadn't spoken much since the announcement. Not even when the pastor's wife came and asked if she was happy. She just nodded. But her heart was sinking deeper and deeper. Suddenly, someone tapped her shoulder. She turned and saw Ezin, her only friend in the whole village. Ezin sat beside her, breathing heavily like she had been running. "I heard," Ezin said softly. "Is it true?" Adiz nodded without looking at her. "They're really marrying you off to Obina." Adiz kept her head down. "Yes. But you're not even 18. You don't love him. Why aren't you saying something?" "What should I say, Ezin? If I refuse, they will beat me or throw me out. And where will I go? Who will take me?" Ezin held her hand tightly. "Then let's run. Let's hide you. I'll talk to my cousin in the next village." "No," Adiz interrupted gently. "If I run, it will only make it worse. They'll say I'm stubborn and a disgrace. At least now, maybe God is watching. Maybe this shame will be my last one." Ezin's eyes filled with tears. "You don't deserve this." Adiz smiled weakly. "None of us do. But life doesn't always give us what we deserve." They sat together quietly for a while. Then Ezin whispered, "I'll be there tomorrow. I'll stand beside you. Even if the whole village laughs, I won't." Adiz squeezed her hand. "Thank you." The next morning, the compound was already full by 9 a.m. Villagers gathered, whispering and pointing. A makeshift canopy had been set up under the mango tree. Old plastic chairs were arranged in a rough circle. A small wooden table stood in the middle, with a worn-out white cloth covering it. That was where the officiating elder would stand. No pastor agreed to come. Nobody wanted to be part of the shame. The only one who agreed was Baba Sadiq, the oldest man in the village, who was paid with a bottle of palm wine and half a bag of rice. Inside the house, Mama Neka forced Adiz into a tattered cream blouse and a faded blue wrapper. "This was your mother's own," she said with a wicked grin. "Since you've chosen disgrace, it's only right you wear her old clothes." China stood at the door, laughing as Adiz adjusted the wrapper. "You look like a housemaid going to sweep the market square," China said. Adiz didn't say anything. She just tied the wrapper tighter and stood up. Mama Neka pushed her forward. "Go out. Let the people see the bride of the century." When Adiz stepped outside, the entire compound went quiet for a moment. The crowd stared. Some women covered their mouths. Some laughed. Some just shook their heads. A boy whispered loudly, "She looks like she's going to a burial, not a wedding." Adiz kept her head low. She didn't look at anyone. Then, from the other end of the compound, a small group of children shouted, "He's coming! He's coming!" All heads turned. Obina was walking slowly toward the gathering, barefoot, wearing 3 different colored shirts on top of each other, and what looked like a curtain tied around his waist. His hair was rough. His beard was wild. He carried a small black nylon bag in his left hand and a stick in his right. The village burst into laughter. Women held their sides. Men shouted things like, "This is better than Nollywood. And who needs a cinema when we have this?" But Obina kept walking, eyes steady, face calm. He stopped right in front of Adiz. She looked up at him slowly, expecting to see madness in his eyes. But what she saw shocked her. His eyes were kind, warm, gentle. He bowed his head slightly and said, "Good morning, Adiz." The way he said her name, soft, respectful, made her blink twice. She nodded. "Good morning." Baba Sadiq raised his hand. Let us begin. The ceremony was short. No prayers. No songs. Just mockery from the crowd and laughter every 2 minutes. Do you, O Binna, take this girl as your wife? Baba Sadiq asked. I do, he said calmly. Do you, Adiz, take this man as your husband? Adiz looked at Obinna, then looked at the crowd, then whispered, I do. The whole place exploded with noise. Somebody shouted, clap for shame. Another shouted, this is the wedding of the year. Even Mama Nekka was laughing hard. Hey, what a life. Uncle Sunday raised a cup of palm wine. To shame. To freedom. Let her carry her bad luck away. After the wedding, Obinna turned to Adiz and stretched out his hand. Shall we go? He asked. Adiz looked at her aunt and uncle. Neither of them said goodbye. They didn't even look at her. She turned away slowly and followed Obinna. The crowd watched them walk out of the compound. Adiz barefoot, holding nothing, no bag, no gift, not even water. Obinna beside her, quiet and calm. Some laughed again. Some shook their heads. Ezin watched from the back, wiping her eyes. They walked for almost an hour. No one said anything. The road was dry, and the sun was hot. Adiz's wrapper kept coming loose, but she held it firmly. Obinna walked at her pace, not rushing, not dragging. Finally, they reached a small corner beside the river. A broken hut stood there. The roof had holes. The windows were just squares with no wood. The door was a piece of cloth nailed to a frame. Obinna pointed. This is home, for now. Adiz looked around and nodded. It's okay. I'll fix the roof next week, he said. There's a stream behind. That's where I fetch water. She nodded again. Do you have a pot? I can cook if there's food. Obinna smiled gently. We'll figure something out. Inside the hut, the only things she saw were a straw mat, one small pillow, a plastic cup, a black kettle, and a torn blanket. Adiz stood silently. Then she sat on the floor and began sweeping the sand into a corner with her hands. Obinna watched her and said softly, You don't have to do anything now. You must be tired. Adiz shook her head. No, I want to make it clean. He didn't argue. He just sat beside the door, staring at the river. After a while, she asked, Why did you agree to marry me? Obinna didn't turn. He just said, Because sometimes, God places things in front of us for a reason, and I don't say no to what he brings. She didn't understand what he meant, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like someone saw her. Not as a burden, not as a curse, not as shame, just a girl trying to survive. The first night in the hut was quiet, but not peaceful. Adiz sat on the cold straw mat, her legs crossed and her eyes staring at the wall made of mud and bamboo sticks. Obinna was outside, sitting on a flat stone near the riverbank, facing the moonlight. The room was dark, lit only by a small lantern Obinna had placed on the floor. It made the shadows dance across the walls. The roof creaked when the wind blew, and the night was filled with the sound of crickets and distant frogs. Adiz looked around again. There was nothing in the hut that looked like a home. No clothes, no food, no plates. Just one plastic cup, one kettle, a torn wrapper used as curtain, and the old mat she was now sitting on. Still, she didn't complain. After all, this was the first time she was living somewhere without being shouted at, without being insulted, without being reminded that she was not wanted. The silence outside made her nervous. Obinna had barely spoken since they arrived. He showed her the hut, helped her clean, fetched a little water from the stream, and then quietly stepped outside. She stood up, walked to the doorway, and looked out. He was still there, sitting with his back straight, eyes fixed on the flowing river. His walking stick was beside him. His long shirt, even though faded, blew gently in the breeze. Are you all right? She asked softly. Obinna turned slightly and nodded. Yes. You've been sitting there for a long time. I like the sound of water. It helps me think. Adiz stepped out and sat on the ground near the door. What do you think about? He was quiet for a few seconds, then said, about everything. Life, the past, the future, mistakes. She hugged her knees and stared at the river too. I used to sit like this with my father. He would tell me stories. He said water carries people's pain and takes it far away. Obinna smiled a little. Your father sounds wise. He was. He died in a fire. My mother too. I know, he said gently. I'm sorry. She looked at him. How did you end up under the bridge? Obinna didn't answer immediately. He looked down at the stones by his feet. Sometimes, life pushes you far away from where you started. And when you want to come back, you're no longer sure how. Adiz nodded slowly. She understood that feeling. They sat in silence again. Not the kind that feels awkward, but the kind that feels like two people are trying to breathe after drowning for too long. The next morning, Adiz woke up early. She rolled up the mat and folded the blanket. Her neck hurt from sleeping on the hard floor, but she didn't complain. She stepped outside and saw Obinna already sweeping around the hut with a small bunch of palm fronds. Good morning, she said. Morning, he replied with a smile. You slept well. She nodded. Yes, thank you. I boiled water, he said. It's still warm. You can wash your face. Adiz walked to the small clay pot near the firewood area and saw the steaming kettle beside it. She poured a little water into a bowl and washed her face. Then she turned. Do you have any food? I can cook something. Obinna shook his head. Not yet, but I'll go to the village soon. Maybe I can find something to trade. Adiz nodded. Okay, I'll clean the hut while you're gone. Obinna left with his black nylon bag and walking stick, moving slowly but firmly toward the market road. Adiz stayed behind and got to work. She swept the hut again, gathered the scattered stones around the front, picked up broken pieces of wood and stacked them neatly. She even used water from the stream to scrub the mud floor. By the time she finished, the sun was high, and her clothes were soaked with sweat. But the place looked cleaner. Even the air smelled fresher. She looked around and smiled for the first time in days. Obinna returned around noon with a small black pot, 2 cups, a few onions, some gari, and dried fish. It's not much, he said, but it's something. Adiz took the items from him carefully. This is plenty. Thank you. She boiled water, roasted the dried fish a little, and made gari with salt and onions. It wasn't a rich meal, but when they sat and ate it together on the floor, it felt like the best food in the world. After eating, Obinna washed the plates while Adiz cleaned the pot. Then he sat under the tree outside and pulled out a small notebook from his bag. Adiz noticed it and asked, You can write? Obinna looked at her with a raised eyebrow. Of course. Can't you? She shook her head. My uncle stopped me from going to school after primary 6. He nodded slowly. If you want, I can teach you. Adiz blinked. Really? Yes, everyone deserves to read and write. That evening, he taught her how to spell her full name in capital letters. She repeated it over and over like a song. Adaeze, she said proudly. Obinna smiled. Perfect. Days passed. Then weeks. Life in the hut was hard, but it was peaceful. They had no money, but they always found a way to eat. Obinna would trade small items in the market, and Adiz would cook with whatever they had. Sometimes they ate roasted yam, sometimes pepper soup with no meat. At night, they sat outside and talked. Obinna told strange stories, not village tales, but deep things about the world, about how people hide their true selves. Adiz started to notice things. He spoke with big words sometimes, then quickly changed them to smaller ones. His hands, though rough, had soft nails, like someone who once lived well. And sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, he stared at the stars like they were his old friends. One day, she asked, Who were you before? He looked surprised. What do you mean? You talk like someone who used to live another life. A better one. You walk like someone who knows more than he says. Obinna didn't smile this time. He looked at her seriously. And you talk like someone who sees through people's masks. They both fell silent. Then he said, maybe one day, I'll tell you. One afternoon, a heavy storm came. The wind tore through the trees, and the sky turned dark quickly. Adiz ran to close the cloth covering the door, but it flew off. Water started pouring into the hut through the holes in the roof. Obinna grabbed a metal basin to catch the water. Adiz used the pot to do the same. Suddenly, the small shelf they used to store their food collapsed. The onions rolled away, and the gari spilled into the muddy floor. Oh no! Adiz shouted, rushing to save what she could. But the water was already everywhere. She pulled their mat to one corner, then used her wrapper to block a hole in the wall. By the time the rain stopped, the hut was soaked. Their food was gone. The mat was wet, and both of them were shivering. But Adiz still stood up and tried to clean the mess. Obinna stopped her. Sit down. You've done enough. She shook her head. No. If we don't fix it now, we'll sleep in mud. He touched her hand gently. Adiz, you're not like other girls. You don't cry. You don't complain, even when things are hard. She sat beside him and said quietly, crying doesn't change anything. He looked at her for a long time. Then he said, you deserve so much more. Adiz didn't answer. Her throat felt tight. That night, after they cleaned what they could and shared the last dry bread from Obinna's bag, she laid on the mat and stared at the roof. Obinna sat outside again, on the same flat stone, facing the river. She watched him from the doorway. The moonlight lit up half his face. He looked like someone carrying a big secret. Then she whispered to herself, who are you, Obinna? The morning after the storm, Adiz woke up cold and tired. The floor was still wet. The mat was damp. Her wrapper clung to her skin. She sat up slowly, her back aching. Obinna was already outside. She could hear him chopping wood with a small blunt cutlass. The sound was sharp and steady. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders and stepped out. The sky was clear, but the ground was muddy. Water dripped from the trees, and the river beside their hut was moving faster than usual. Obinna looked up when he saw her. You should still be resting, he said. I couldn't sleep, she replied. Too cold. She nodded. Obinna dropped the wood and walked over. He placed his hands on her shoulders gently. I'll build a better fire today. You'll be warm before evening. She gave a small smile. Thank you. He looked around. We'll fix the roof this week. I know a boy in the next village who can help. I'll speak to him. Adiz touched the side of the hut gently. I don't mind the leaks. I just want to keep it clean. Obinna's eyes rested on her face for a moment longer than usual. You're not angry at me, he asked. Angry? For what? For bringing you here. For letting them marry you off to me. She took a deep breath. You didn't force me. And you've been kind. That's more than I ever got from the people who raised me. Obinna looked away. Then he said softly, You've never asked me to buy you anything. You've never blamed me. You've never shouted. Not even once. Adiz looked down at the mud between her toes. What would shouting change? Obinna didn't answer. He just walked back to the firewood and continued chopping. Later that day, Obinna went to the next village to look for the boy he spoke about. He told Adiz he wouldn't take long. But hours passed. The sun moved from the middle of the sky to the edge. The shadows grew longer. Adiz waited. She cleaned the hut. She fetched water. She repaired one of the walls with wet mud. But Obinna didn't return. As night approached, she became worried. She sat by the road, eyes fixed on the distance. It was almost dark when he finally appeared. But he wasn't walking normally. He was limping. His shirt was torn, and there was a small cut above his eyebrow. He held his side like something hurt badly. Adiz ran to him. What happened? Obinna tried to smile but winced. Just a small fight. With who? Some boys. I passed through a rough path. They wanted to collect my bag. I refused. Adiz placed his arm over her shoulder. Let's go inside. They entered the hut slowly. She helped him sit down, then quickly tore a piece of cloth to clean the blood on his head. You should have waited till morning, she said. I thought I'd be fast, he replied. You're bleeding. It's not deep. She brought water, cleaned the cut carefully, and tied the cloth around his head. Lie down, she said. I'll be fine. Lie down, she repeated, more firmly. He obeyed. She placed the blanket over him and sat beside him. Thank you, he whispered. Adiz looked at him. Why do you always act like nothing is wrong, even when you're hurt? Obinna opened his eyes slowly. Because I've been through worse. Still, you shouldn't pretend you're not human. He smiled weakly. You're the only person who's told me that. Adiz stood, walked to the corner, and picked up the remaining bread from the roof ledge. She gave it to him with water. It's not much, she said. He took it with a nod. It's enough. That night, Adiz stayed awake, sitting beside him, checking if he was breathing properly. When the lamp went off, she didn't move. She just held her knees and whispered a short prayer. The next morning, Obinna's wound had dried a little, but he was still weak. Adiz made him sit under the tree while she did the rest. She fetched water, prepared hot gari, and even boiled bitter leaf soup with one small dry fish she had been saving. Obinna watched her. Do you ever get tired? He asked. I'm used to it, she replied. He looked at the small fire crackling beside her. Back then, I used to complain about everything. Even when food was hot, I'd complain. If it rained too much, I'd be angry. But now, I sit here and watch you turn a broken hut into a home, and I wonder. Adiz turned. You wonder what? I wonder if I ever knew what it meant to be rich. She didn't reply. She just stirred the soup slowly. After they ate, she cleaned the plates and sat beside him under the tree. The wind was cool. She looked at him carefully. Obinna, can I ask something? Anything. Are you truly a beggar? Obinna blinked. I mean, she continued, you speak like someone who has lived better. You write, you count fast, you even use English sometimes without knowing. Obinna rested his back against the tree. Why does it matter? Because I want to know the truth. He looked at her for a while, then said, I'm not a beggar. Not really. She sat still. I left my life behind, he added. I left everything. My house, my car, my company. I walked away. Why? He looked at her. Because I was surrounded by liars. Everyone smiled in front of me and planned evil behind my back. I wanted to know if there were still people in the world who were good, even when they had nothing. Adiz stared at him. So you came here, dressed like a madman. Obinna nodded, and the whole village believed it. Only you didn't treat me like trash. She was quiet. Obinna leaned forward. Adiz, I've been watching you. From the first day we met. I pretended to be sick one night, just to see what you'd do. You gave me your only food. I dropped money on the floor and left it there. You saw it and didn't take it. You wash. You clean. You cook. You care. And not once have you ever asked for anything. She swallowed hard. He looked into her eyes. You are the proof I was looking for. Adiz didn't know what to say. Her heart was beating too fast. Obinna smiled gently. Don't worry. I won't force you to believe me. One day, you'll see it all. That evening, Obinna walked a little better. He collected wood and repaired the window. Adiz helped patch the leaking roof using palm leaves and mud. By night, the hut was warmer, cleaner, safer. They sat outside, facing the moon. I don't hate my aunt anymore, Adiz said suddenly. Obinna looked at her. She hated me. She treated me like a dog. But if she didn't, I wouldn't be here. You're that forgiving. She nodded. If I carry pain in my heart, I won't have space for joy. Obinna exhaled slowly. You're stronger than you think. She leaned back and looked at the sky. Do you think I'll ever have a real life? You already do, he said. She turned to him. Because you're real, he added. That night, Obinna stood by the river again. He looked up at the stars and whispered, "She is the one. She's the reason I left everything. And now, I found her." Then he reached into his bag and touched a phone wrapped in cloth. It had been off for months. But soon, it would come on. Very soon. The next morning felt different. The air was still. The birds were quiet. The sky looked too blue. Even the trees beside the river didn't shake as usual. Adiz stepped out of the hut holding the black kettle and looked around. Something didn't feel normal. She walked down to the stream to fetch water. As she bent to scoop, she looked at her own reflection. Her eyes were no longer full of fear. Her skin looked clearer. Her face was tired but peaceful. She stood upright and whispered, "God, are you really watching me? Did you hear my prayers all those years?" Then she turned and climbed back up the path to the hut. When she reached, the door was open. Obinna was not inside. She looked around the small compound. He wasn't outside either. She placed the kettle down and called softly, "Obinna." No reply. She walked to the edge of the trees. "Obinna." Still nothing. She sat down beside the tree, worried. He had never left without telling her. He always said where he was going. He always came back before evening. This time, he didn't even take his walking stick. Hours passed. Adiz cleaned the hut. She swept the yard. She cooked watery okra with crayfish. She left a portion for him, but he didn't return. By nightfall, she couldn't sleep. She stepped out of the hut and sat on the stone he always sat on. Her fingers trembled. Her heart raced. Her eyes searched the trees for any sign of him. But he was gone. 2 days passed. Still, no sign. On the third day, she woke up early and started walking toward the village. Her feet were tired. Her throat was dry. But she kept going. When she reached the village square, she saw something strange. People were standing in groups, talking. Old women held their mouths wide open. Children were running back and forth, shouting, "Come and see! Come and see! Rich man don't enter our village." Adiz paused. She turned to one of the women near the fruit stall. "What's going on?" she asked. The woman didn't even look at her. She was too busy staring down the road. Adiz followed her eyes. A black SUV was driving slowly into the village. Behind it, 2 more cars followed. Shiny, big, and covered in dust from the village road. The cars stopped in front of the chief's palace. Uniformed men stepped out quickly, their shoes clean, their faces serious. The door of the first car opened slowly. A man stepped out, tall, neatly dressed, wearing dark glasses. A gold wristwatch flashed on his arm. His shoes shined in the sun. Gasps spread through the crowd. Then came the whispers. "Is that not? It can't be. No, it's the madman, the one that lived under the bridge." Adiz's heart jumped. She took a step forward. The man removed his glasses. It was Obinna, clean-shaven, hair trimmed, skin glowing, beard shaped, lips calm. He stood straight, his shoulders wide, his chest bold. Someone screamed, "Obinna!" The crowd went wild. People rushed forward. Obinna raised one hand, calmly. The guard stepped in front to block the crowd. Adiz stood frozen. She couldn't move. She couldn't even breathe. Inside the palace compound, the chief stepped out, confused. "What's the meaning of all this?" Obinna walked up to him slowly. "My name is Obinna Nwosu," he said clearly. "Son of the late Chief Chibuza Nwosu, owner of Nwosu Oil and Gas, Nwosu Estates, and Nwosu Foundation." The chief blinked. I remember. Your father came to this village once." Obinna nodded. "Yes, I'm his only child." The chief looked down. "They said you were missing, that you died years ago." Obinna smiled. "I was missing, but I didn't die." The chief held his staff tighter. "Why did you come back now?" "I came to see something," Obinna said, "and I found it." The villagers were still outside the gate, shouting and whispering. Obinna turned to one of his men. Where is she? Still outside the crowd, sir. Bring her. Two guards stepped out quickly. Adiz didn't run. She just stood still, eyes wide, heart pounding. One of them came to her gently. Please follow us, he said. She looked at the ground. Why? Someone is waiting for you. They walked her through the crowd. The villagers parted, staring at her like she was a ghost. Some looked shocked. Some looked jealous. Others looked confused. Inside the compound, Obinna stood alone. She stepped in. Their eyes met. She froze. He walked to her slowly. Hello, Adiz, he said softly. Her lips moved, but no words came out. He stepped closer. I'm sorry I left without saying anything. She shook her head. You lied to me. No, he said. I just didn't tell you yet. You're rich. Yes. You're not a beggar. No. Why? Obinna looked down. Because I wanted to see if real kindness still exists. If someone could love without knowing there's money involved. If someone could give without expecting anything back. Adiz's voice broke. So you tested me. He looked up. No. I trusted you. She turned away. Everyone used me. My aunt, my uncle, even you. Obinna moved closer. Adiz, you saved me. Not from hunger, but from pride. You reminded me what it means to be human. You treated me like a person when the whole world saw a madman. She was crying now. Obinna stepped forward again. I left the money behind to find a wife. Not just any wife. A true woman. A woman who knows pain, but still chooses to love. He knelt down. The whole palace went silent. The chief looked stunned. The guards looked shocked. Even the breeze stopped blowing. Obinna reached into his pocket and brought out a small box. He opened it. Inside was a silver ring. Will you give me another chance to do this the right way? He asked. Will you be my wife, not in shame, but in honor? Adiz covered her mouth. Tears rolled down her face. She looked at him, kneeling in front of her, surrounded by riches, power, and silence. Then she whispered, yes. Obinna stood up and pulled her into a hug. The crowd outside the gate cheered without knowing why. The chief shook his head and laughed. This village will not recover from this story. Later that evening, the cars drove through the village again. This time, Adiz was sitting in the back seat, beside Obinna. She wore a new gown. Her hair was brushed. Her feet had slippers with beads. The villagers lined the road. Some clapped. Some bowed. Mama Neka and Uncle Sunday stood in front of their house, their mouths wide open. They didn't even blink. Obinna made the driver stop. He stepped out slowly and opened the door for Adiz. She stepped out. Mama Neka gasped. Uncle Sunday dropped his walking stick. Adiz looked at them. They both fell to their knees. My daughter! Mama Neka cried. Please forgive us. We didn't know. Uncle Sunday shouted. Obinna held Adiz's hand. You don't owe them anything. But Adiz stepped forward. She looked at them calmly. I forgive you, she said. Not because you deserve it, but because I want peace. Mama Neka grabbed her feet. Thank you. Thank you. Adiz turned and walked back to the car. Obinna opened the door for her again. She entered. He followed. The driver drove off. Mama Neka sat on the floor, still crying. Uncle Sunday stared at the road, speechless. At the mansion in the city, Adiz stood in front of the mirror. The room was bigger than her uncle's entire house. She turned slowly. Her eyes sparkled. Her hands shook. Obinna entered. She turned to him. Is this real? He smiled. Very real. You changed my life. He held her hands. No, you changed mine. She looked around the room. Is this my room? He nodded. And the kitchen? Downstairs. The garden? Yours. She covered her mouth. He stepped closer. You were never the girl they said you were. You were always royalty. They just never saw it. She leaned on his chest. I want to help other girls like me, she whispered. Girls with no one. Girls that cry alone. Obinna kissed her forehead. Then we will. The next day, newspapers carried the story. Homeless man marries orphan girl. Turns out to be billionaire. Village wedding turns to fairy tale. The girl who married shame. And found gold. And in one corner of the paper was a small quote from Obinna himself. I went searching for a heart that cannot be bought. I found it in a girl named Adiz. Adiz stood at the large glass window of the mansion, staring out at the garden. The sky was bright. The trees were tall and quiet. The flowers in the yard swayed gently like they knew they were being watched. She had never seen a house so big. Every time she walked into a new room, it felt like she was in a dream she didn't want to wake up from. The first night in the mansion, she couldn't sleep. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart beating fast. How did I go from being a house girl to this? Is this really my life now? Everything was still new. The soft bed, the clean floors, the way the guards greeted her good morning, Ma, with serious faces. Even the way Obinna looked at her now was different. It wasn't pity. It wasn't surprise. It was something deeper, something calm, something respectful. That morning, Adiz sat at the long dining table with Obinna. A maid served them tea and bread with scrambled eggs. She had never eaten this type of breakfast before. Obinna watched her quietly, then said, "You're still not used to it, are you?" She smiled, shaking her head. "It feels strange." "Do you like it?" "Yes, but I keep thinking it will all disappear." "It won't." She picked up the teacup and held it with both hands. "Sometimes I still feel like I'm in that old hut," she said softly, "waking up to sweep and boil water. I still wake up too early, expecting to hear my aunt's voice shouting my name." Obinna leaned forward. "You don't ever have to hear her voice again." Adiz nodded slowly. "But I forgive her." Obinna raised his brow. "Already?" "Yes. She hurt me, but if I keep her in my heart, I won't have space for peace." Obinna smiled. "That's why I chose you." 2 days later, a knock came at the front gate. Obinna's chief security guard went to check. After a short conversation, he returned to the main house and knocked gently at the sitting room door. "Sir, some people are at the gate. They say they know Madam." Obinna looked up from the newspaper. "Who?" "A woman called Mama Necker. She came with her husband. They've been begging to see her since morning." Adiz looked up from the magazine she was reading. Her face changed. Obinna saw it. He turned to the guard. "Let them in." The guard nodded and walked away. Adiz stood from her seat slowly. Her heart was beating fast, but her face remained calm. "Are you sure you want to see them?" Obinna asked. "I want to." "You don't have to prove anything to them." "I'm not proving anything," she said. "I just want to see how it feels when the table turns." A few minutes later, Mama Necker and Uncle Sunday were led into the sitting room. They looked completely different. Gone were their loud voices and sharp tongues. Gone were their proud shoulders. Now, their clothes were old. Their faces were tired. They both looked smaller than Adiz remembered. As soon as they entered, Mama Necker dropped to her knees. "Adiz, my daughter," she cried. "Please forgive us." Uncle Sunday knelt beside her, looking down. "We are sorry. We didn't know. Please, Adiz." Adiz remained standing. She didn't move. She didn't speak yet. She just stared at them. Memories rushed into her mind. The day they forced her to marry Obinna. The way they laughed at her. The day they called her a curse. The countless nights she cried alone in the kitchen. She took a deep breath and stepped closer. "You only came because you saw the cars and the cameras," she said calmly. "Not because you truly care." "No," Mama Necker said quickly. "We care. You are our blood. You sold me off to disgrace me." Uncle Sunday spoke softly. "We were blind. We were wicked. Please, give us one more chance." Adiz looked at them quietly. Then she said, "If I had died in that hut, you would not have cared. You would have said I deserved it. But now, because I wear clean clothes and eat good food, you remember me." Tears rolled down Mama Necker's cheeks. "You can take the food," Adiz said. "You can take the money, but you can never buy back the years you stole from me." They remained on the floor, crying and begging. Obinna stood beside Adiz and asked, "Should I have them removed?" Adiz shook her head. "No." She turned to them again. "I forgive you." They looked up quickly, shocked. "But forgiveness is not the same as access," she added. "You can go now." They were silent. "Take the food we will send you," she said, "and go live your life. I'll live mine." Obinna gave a small nod to the guard. He signaled another man to escort them out. As they were led out, Mama Necker kept turning back, crying, "Adiz, my daughter." But Adiz didn't respond. She just turned around and sat down. Obinna stood behind her and placed his hands gently on her shoulders. "You did the right thing," he whispered. She wiped her eyes slowly. "I don't want to hate anyone," she said, "but I will never forget." A week later, Obinna took Adiz on a tour of his foundation. They visited a home for abandoned girls. Adiz spoke with them, hugged them, and even joined them in cooking. When they left, she told Obinna, "I want to help more of them." He smiled. "We'll build a new center. It will be named after you." "No," she said. "It should be called the Home of Second Chances." Obinna looked at her for a long time. "You're the girl they tried to bury," he said. "But they didn't know you were a seed." Adiz smiled gently. Later that night, they sat in the garden. The stars were bright. The wind was soft. Adiz leaned her head on Obinna's shoulder. "Do you remember the night we met?" she asked. "Yes. You were wearing your mother's wrapper. You were wearing 3 shirts and mismatched slippers." They both laughed quietly. Obinna held her hand. "From shame to grace. From broken to blessed," Adiz replied. They sat there quietly, listening to the sound of the water fountain nearby. Then Adiz said, "I'm ready." "Ready for what?" "To marry you again. Properly this time." Obinna looked at her and smiled. "Then let's plan the biggest wedding this village has ever seen." The air inside the study room was cool and quiet. Adiz sat on a soft chair with her hands resting on her lap. She watched the wall clock slowly tick. The second hand moved like it was dragging time along with it. Obinna stood at the far end of the room, speaking quietly on the phone. His voice was calm but serious. His eyes kept flicking toward her like he was holding back something. When he ended the call, he turned fully and walked back to her. "They found something," he said. Adiz straightened in her seat. "About what?" Obinna sat beside her. He didn't speak at once. "Obinna," she asked again, "what did they find?" He looked into her eyes and sighed. "Adiz, the fire that killed your parents. The one they said was an accident." Her chest tightened. She nodded slowly. Obinna reached for the envelope on the table beside them and placed it in her hand. "I asked my lawyer to investigate it. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure if anything would come out of it." Adiz stared at the envelope. Her fingers didn't move. "I think it's time you opened it," Obinna said softly. Her hands finally moved. She opened the brown envelope and pulled out some papers. Her eyes moved over the lines slowly. Then she saw the name. Sunday Okafor. Her uncle. The report said he had taken a loan in her father's name just weeks before the fire. It said the shop had been insured under her parents' names, but the money from the insurance was claimed by her uncle. The paper said the fire was deliberate, planned, set. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She dropped the paper on the table and stood up. "No," she whispered. Obinna stood too. "Adiz. No, no, no. This can't be true. My uncle, he's wicked, yes, but not like this." Obinna didn't interrupt. He let her speak. "He beat me, insulted me, sold me off like trash. But to kill my parents? To burn down the shop? To collect money from their death?" Her knees became weak. She sat back down quickly, covering her mouth with both hands. "I should have known," she whispered. "I should have known it was more than just hate." Obinna sat beside her. "You didn't know because you were a child. It wasn't your fault." Her hands shook. "He didn't just ruin my life. He took everything from me. My parents. My home. My peace." Silence hung in the room. Then she asked, "What do we do now?" Obinna looked at her gently. "That's up to you." She turned to him. "What would you do if it was your family?" Obinna didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "I would want justice." Adiz nodded slowly. "I want justice too," she said. "But I don't want revenge. I want the truth to come out, and I want him to face the law." That same week, Obinna's legal team gathered every document, every record, every witness report. The police reopened the case. Adiz didn't hide. She gave her own statement. She described how her uncle took over everything after the fire, how he refused to let her return to school, how he locked her in the house while they sold her father's land. The officers listened carefully and took notes. "We will handle it from here," one of them said. "You've done your part." 2 days later, news spread like wildfire across the village. Uncle Sunday had been arrested. The police came early in the morning and took him away in front of everyone. Mama Neka screamed and ran after them, but the officers told her to stand back. The village market shook with noise. "They said he burned his own brother's shop," one woman shouted. "And collected the insurance money," another said. "God is watching, oh," someone added. Adiz didn't feel joy. She didn't dance or celebrate. She just sat quietly in her room, looking out the window, her hands folded across her chest. Obinna entered the room slowly. He didn't say anything. He just sat beside her and held her hand. "He used to carry me on his shoulders when I was small," Adiz said quietly. "He would buy me sweets. He told me I looked like my mother. I trusted him." Obinna squeezed her hand. "Evil wears a smile sometimes." She turned to him. "What happens now?" "He'll face trial. If the court finds him guilty, he'll go to prison." Adiz nodded. "And Mama Neka?" Obinna shrugged. "She's not on any papers, but she'll have to live with the shame." Adiz looked down at her hands. "Do you think she knew?" Obinna didn't answer right away. "Maybe. Maybe not. Some people stay quiet even when they know the truth." The next Sunday, Adiz visited her parents' grave for the first time in years. Obinna followed her. They stood before 2 simple headstones at the edge of the village. She placed fresh flowers on the graves and knelt. "Mama, Papa, I know you see me now. I didn't forget you. I tried to stay strong. I tried to be good." Obinna stood behind her, silent. Adiz touched the earth gently. "I know what happened now. I know who took you away. But I won't let it turn my heart bitter. I promise to live a life that makes you proud." Back in the city, Adiz sat with Obinna in the garden. "I want to help orphans," she said. "Not just feed them. I want to give them school, protection, love." Obinna nodded. "We'll build more centers. I want to name this one after my parents. The Chika and Amaka Foundation." Obinna smiled. "It will be the biggest one yet." She looked at him. "Obinna, thank you." "For what?" "For choosing me, even when I looked like nothing." He held her hand. "You were never nothing. You were just hidden." She smiled. "Let's not hide anymore," she said. "Let's go back to the village. Let's show them what grace looks like." The sun rose slowly over the village. The sky turned soft orange, the air fresh and full of quiet excitement. People were already gathering before the cock crowed. Women tied their best wrappers. Men polished their shoes. Children ran around barefoot, pointing and laughing. The village square had been decorated with white and gold cloth. Chairs were set in rows under 2 giant canopies. Fresh flowers had been placed in every corner. The main road had been graded and sprinkled with water to keep the dust down. It wasn't just a wedding. It was history. A girl they once laughed at was now the queen of the day. Inside the village guest house, Adiz stood in front of a large mirror. She wore a long white gown, simple but beautiful, with lace sleeves and a flowing train that touched the floor. Her hair was neatly packed up in a bun, and tiny silver beads lined the edges. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at her own reflection. "I don't even recognize this girl," she said softly. Ezin, standing beside her, laughed. "Well, that's because you've changed. Inside and outside." "I'm scared," Adiz whispered. Ezin turned to her. "Why? What if people still see me as the girl from the hut?" "Let them see whatever they want," Ezin replied. "They saw shame and called it your name. But now they'll see glory, and they'll still call it your name. You've earned it." Adiz hugged her tightly. "Thank you for never leaving my side," she said. "You're my sister. I will never leave you." Outside, the music began. Soft talking drums echoed through the square. Obinna stood at the altar, wearing a white and gold agbada. His face was calm, but his eyes searched the crowd. Then the drummers changed their beat. The people turned. Gasps filled the air. Adiz stepped out, holding a white bouquet. She walked slowly, her step steady, her head held high. The same villagers who once whispered about her were now clapping. Some even wiped tears. "She's so beautiful," one woman said. "Who would have believed?" another replied. "She's the same girl they laughed at," someone whispered. "She's more than that now," came the answer. "She's proof." As Adiz reached the front, Obinna stretched out his hand. She placed her hand in his. They turned to the officiating minister, who smiled warmly. "This day is not just about a wedding," the minister said. "It's about how pain can turn into joy, how disgrace can become honor, and how love, real love, always finds its way." He turned to Adiz. "Do you, Adiz, take Obinna to be your husband? To stand beside him in truth, in love, in light and in dark?" Adiz smiled. "I do." The minister turned to Obinna. "Do you, Obinna, take Adiz to be your wife, to protect her, honor her, and stand by her for all your days?" Obinna looked into her eyes. "I do." The crowd clapped softly. "You may now exchange rings," the minister said. Obinna brought out a silver ring and slid it onto Adiz's finger. She did the same. The minister raised his hand. "By the power given to me, I now declare you husband and wife. You may now." But before he could finish, Obinna pulled Adiz gently and kissed her forehead. The crowd erupted in joy. Drums rolled louder. Dancers moved in with colorful steps. The entire village square turned into celebration. Later, during the reception, Obinna stood and tapped his glass. The crowd quieted. "I want to say something," he said. All eyes were on him. "Months ago, this village watched a poor girl get married to a beggar. Many of you laughed. Some of you mocked her. Even her own family tried to destroy her." Adiz looked down. Obinna continued. "But this same girl gave her last food to that beggar. She shared her mat with him. She never raised her voice. She never asked for riches. She only gave kindness." He turned to Adiz. She didn't know that the beggar was a billionaire hiding in plain sight. But even if he wasn't, she still would have married him with her whole heart. Gasps filled the air again. "She is my wife now. Not because of her beauty. Not because of her past. But because her heart is the rarest thing I've ever seen." The crowd stood and clapped. Adiz's eyes filled with tears. Then she stood. It was her turn to speak. She held the microphone with both hands and said, "Many of you knew me when I had nothing. You saw me carrying firewood. You saw me wearing torn clothes. You saw me selling pepper under the sun." She looked around. "I forgave those who hurt me, not because I forgot, but because I didn't want to carry their pain into my future." People were silent. "I stand here not as the girl from the hut. I stand here as a woman who was broken but didn't stay broken. And if there's anyone out there still suffering, still being treated like they don't matter, I want you to know, your time is coming." The clapping grew louder. Obinna walked up beside her and held her hand. Together, he said, we'll make sure no girl is ever forced to marry for shame again. As the sun began to set, Adiz sat quietly under a palm tree near the edge of the village square. The music still played, and people still danced, but she wanted a moment alone. Obinna walked up and sat beside her. Happy? He asked. She nodded. It feels like a dream. He looked up at the sky. It's real. She turned to him. What if I had said no that day? What if I had refused the marriage? Then I would have waited for you, he said, even in rags. They both laughed softly. Adiz leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you know what I'm thinking about? She asked. What? The mango tree. The day I married you in front of laughing villagers. I wore a torn wrapper. You wore 3 shirts. I thought my life was over. Obinna smiled. But it was just beginning. She nodded. Now look at us. He turned and held her face gently. No one can stop the story that God writes himself. And with that, they stood, hand in hand, as the drums played into the night. A poor orphan girl and the beggar she married, now king and queen in front of those who once turned their backs.